Dr. Sarah Chun had seen many strange things during her 3 years aboard the interstellar research vessel Meridian, but nothing quite like the massive creature lying broken on the crystalline surface of Valethra Prime. The dragon, for lack of a better term, stretched nearly 200 meters from snout to tail, its scales shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence that seemed to shift between deep emerald and molten gold. What should have been a magnificent sight was instead heartbreaking. The creature's breathing came in labored gasps, and a dark, viscous fluid that could only be blood pooled beneath its massive form. "By the ancient stars," whispered Commander Thex, the ship's Centauri captain, his 4 eyes wide with what Sarah recognized as religious awe. "It's a Drigmarian. I thought they were extinct." Sarah knelt beside the creature's enormous head, her medical scanner beeping frantically as it tried to process readings unlike anything in its database. The dragon's eyes, each the size of dinner plates, tracked her movement. There was intelligence there, deep, ancient, and fading fast. "The energy readings are off the charts," reported Lieutenant Kim from her position near the dragon's midsection. "This thing is generating more power than our ship's reactor, even in this condition." The distress signal that had brought them to this remote moon had been unlike anything Starfleet Command had ever recorded. Not the usual electromagnetic pulses or quantum beacon, but something that seemed to resonate directly with the consciousness of every sentient being within a light-year radius. Sarah had felt it in her dreams 3 nights running, a voice calling for help in a language she didn't know, but somehow understood. "The locals call them star singers," Thex continued, his translator struggling with the reverent tone of his native language. "Legends say they created the first star routes, that their songs could open doorways between worlds." Sarah ran her hands along the dragon's snout, feeling the warmth radiating from its scales. The creature's massive eye focused on her, and she felt something brush against her mind, not intrusive, but gentle, like a question being asked without words. "What happened to you?" she whispered. The answer came not in words, but in images that flooded her consciousness. Sarah saw the dragon soaring through the void of space without any protective suit or vessel, its body naturally adapted to the vacuum. She watched as it encountered a hegemony warship, one of the aggressive machine intelligences that had been expanding their territory through the outer rim. The dragon had tried to communicate, its songs creating beautiful patterns of light and energy. The machines had responded with weapons fire. "It was trying to make contact with the hegemony," Sarah said, breaking the mental connection with a gasp. "They shot it down when it tried to communicate." The wounds were extensive. Sarah's scanner identified at least 17 entry points where plasma bolts had penetrated the dragon's natural armor. Worse, the readings suggested that the creature's internal energy matrix, whatever biological process allowed it to survive in space and generate such massive power, was failing. It was like watching a living star slowly burn out. "There's nothing we can do," said Dr. Voss, the ship's chief medical officer, as he approached with his advanced Terran medical kit. "We don't have equipment designed for anything this size, and the anatomy is completely unknown." Sarah looked at her own modest field kit, standard Earth medical supplies that seemed laughably inadequate. She was just a xenobiologist, not a doctor, and her kit contained basic items: antiseptic, bandages, pain relievers, antibiotics, a few surgical tools, and some emergency stimulants. Compared to Dr. Voss's sophisticated alien tech medical bay, it was primitive. But as she knelt there, something told her to try anyway. "The biorhythms are similar to carbon-based life," she said, running her scanner over the dragon's wounds. "Elevated temperature, rapid pulse, signs of infection setting in around the wound sites." "Sarah, that kit is meant for humans," Dr. Voss said gently. "We're talking about a being that might be older than our civilization." The dragon's breathing became more labored, and those ancient eyes began to dim. Sarah felt the creature's pain, like a physical weight in her chest. Without really thinking about it, she opened her field kit and began to work. The antiseptic hissed as it made contact with the dragon's blood, but instead of the expected rejection reaction, the creature's scales seemed to shimmer with relief. Encouraged, Sarah began cleaning the wounds with a thoroughness that had made her one of Earth's best field researchers. "This is unprecedented," Lieutenant Kim said, her instruments tracking the dragon's vital signs. "Its stress indicators are dropping." Sarah worked with increasing confidence, her small human hands moving across wounds that could have swallowed her whole. The dragon remained perfectly still, as if understanding that she was trying to help. When she applied the antibiotics, simple Terra-manufactured compounds that had served humanity for centuries, the infected tissue around the wounds began to clear almost immediately. The cellular regeneration rate is increasing, Dr. Voss said, his own instruments now tracking Sarah's progress. This shouldn't be possible. Hours passed as Sarah worked methodically through her kit. She used every bandage, every dose of medicine, every tool at her disposal. The dragon's wounds were too large for traditional bandages, but she found that the creature's own scales could be gently repositioned to seal the smaller injuries. For the larger wounds, she improvised with emergency foam compounds, creating seals that the dragon's body seemed to accept and integrate. The energy readings are stabilizing, Kim reported, excitement creeping into her voice. It's working, but Sarah could feel that something more was needed. The dragon's external wounds were healing, but the internal damage to its energy matrix remained critical. She placed her hands on the creature's chest, feeling the irregular rhythm of whatever served as its heart. The dragon's eye opened again, focusing on her with newfound clarity. This time, when their minds touched, Sarah felt not pain, but gratitude and something else. Information. The dragon was showing her something about its physiology, about the network of energy channels that ran through its body like a secondary circulatory system. I need a neural stimulant, Sarah said, reaching for one of the last items in her kit. It was meant for human brain trauma, designed to jumpstart neural pathways after severe injury. Sarah, we don't know how that will affect an alien nervous system, Dr. Voss warned. It's dying anyway, Sarah replied, her hands already preparing the injection. And it's showing me where it needs to go. Following the dragon's silent guidance, Sarah located a specific point near the base of the creature's skull where the scales formed a natural depression. The neural stimulant, designed for human brain, seemed impossibly small against the dragon's massive form. But as Sarah administered the injection, she felt a surge of connection unlike anything she'd ever experienced. The dragon's body convulsed once, then went still. For a terrifying moment, Sarah thought she had killed it. Then, light began to flow beneath its scales, starting from the injection site, and spreading throughout its body in patterns that reminded her of circuit boards or star charts. The creature's wounds began to close with visible speed, and its breathing deepened and strengthened. The dragon raised its massive head, looking at Sarah with eyes that now blazed with renewed life. When it opened its mouth, no sound emerged in the traditional sense. Instead, music filled the air, hauntingly beautiful tones that seemed to resonate in the bones and soul. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face without knowing why. By the void, Commander Thex whispered. It's singing the song of deep gratitude. I've only heard of this in the oldest texts. The dragon's song continued for several minutes, growing in complexity and beauty until every member of the crew was openly weeping. Then, with movements that belied its enormous size, the creature rose to its feet. It looked down at Sarah, and she felt its voice in her mind. Not in words, but in concepts that her brain translated as best it could. Little healing singer, you have given me back the star paths. This gift will not be forgotten. With that, the dragon spread wings that seemed to contain entire galaxies and launched itself into the purple sky of Vaelthera Prime. Sarah watched until it disappeared among the stars, still feeling the echo of its presence in her mind. We need to report this to command, Dr. Voss said, but his voice seemed distant and unreal after the dragon's song. Sarah looked down at her empty medical kit. Every single item used, every tool employed in the most important medical procedure of her life. She had saved a creature of legend with nothing more than basic human medical supplies and the willingness to try. What she didn't know was that the dragon's song had carried further than the crew could detect. Across the galaxy, other Dragmarians heard the song of deep gratitude and knew that something unprecedented had occurred. The star singers had thought themselves alone in the universe, the last of an ancient race slowly fading into extinction. But now one of their own lived who should have died, saved by a small being from a young species called humanity. The news would spread through channels older than recorded history, carried by songs that traversed the quantum foam between stars. And with it would come questions about these humans who could heal with such simple tools and pure intention. Sarah packed up her empty kit, unaware that her actions had just changed the course of galactic history. She had saved a dying dragon, But in doing so, she had announced humanity's presence to powers and principalities that had existed since the galaxy was young. Some would see humans as a beacon of hope in an increasingly dark universe. Others would view them as a threat to be eliminated. But for now, as the crew of the Meridian prepared to depart Valefor Prime, Sarah Chun was simply a xenobiologist who had done what she thought was right. The dragon was alive, soaring once again among the stars, and that was enough. The real consequences of her compassion would reveal themselves soon enough. 3 weeks after the incident on Valefor Prime, Sarah Chun was still trying to process what had happened. The official reports had been filed, complete with sensor readings and medical documentation that would probably be studied for decades. But the official reports couldn't capture the feeling of touching a mind older than human civilization, or the way the dragon's song had seemed to rewrite something fundamental in her DNA. She was reviewing xenobiological data in her quarters aboard the Meridian when the first delegation arrived. Dr. Chun, please report to Docking Bay 7 immediately, came Commander Thex's voice over the intercom. There was something in his tone, a mixture of awe and apprehension, that made Sarah drop everything and run. The ship that had docked with the Meridian was unlike anything in the Federation databases. It seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves suggesting something between a massive flower and a sea creature. As Sarah entered the docking bay, she was greeted by beings she had only seen in ancient artistic depictions. 3 Cerinthians glided toward her, their elongated forms moving with liquid grace. Their translucent skin revealed complex internal structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and their large, multifaceted eyes reflected the bay's lighting like living jewels. The lead figure, distinguished by silver patterns that flowed across its skin like living metal, approached Sarah with movements that seemed choreographed to music only it could hear. Dr. Sarah Chun. The being spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that reminded Sarah of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I am Conductor Zephyriel of the Third Harmony. We have traveled far to meet the one who sang healing to a star singer. I'm sorry, Sarah said, confused by the terminology. I didn't sing anything. I just provided medical treatment. The Cerinthian's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Sarah somehow recognized as amusement. Ah, but you did sing, little healer. Every act of true compassion creates music in the quantum substrate of reality. The Drakmarian you save carried that song across the star paths, and all who can hear the deep music have listened. Commander Thex stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. The Cerinthian collective has been silent for over 2 centuries. This is unprecedented. Silence was necessary, Zephyriel explained. The galaxy grew dark with the expansion of the hegemony. Their machine minds cannot comprehend the deep music, and they destroy what they cannot understand. We withdrew to hidden worlds. Waiting for what? Sarah asked. For a sign that compassion still lived among the younger races. Your species is very young, Dr. Chun. By our measurements, humanity emerged from its birth world mere moments ago. Yet you carry something we had feared was lost, the ability to heal without thought of reward, to show mercy without calculation. Over the next several hours, as the Meridian held station, more ships arrived. Sarah watched through the observation deck as vessels of impossible variety took positions around the research ship. Some were clearly mechanical, their angular forms bristling with weapons and sensors. Others seemed to be carved from single massive crystals that caught and refracted the light of nearby stars. A few appeared to be living creatures, vast spaceborne entities that moved with purpose and intelligence. 18 different species, Lieutenant Kim reported, her voice filled with wonder. Some of these are first contacts. We're looking at civilizations that predate the Federation by millennia. Each delegation brought the same message. They had heard the song of deep gratitude carried by the Drakmarian, and they wished to meet the healer who had saved one of the star singers. Sarah found herself in a succession of meetings that would have overwhelmed seasoned diplomats. The crystalline hegemony, not to be confused with the hostile machine hegemony, sent beings that looked like living gemstones. They communicated through harmonics that made the ship's hull ring like a bell and spoke of Sarah's actions in terms of resonance patterns and crystal clarity of purpose. The void touched were perhaps the strangest, beings that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions human science couldn't properly measure. They appeared as shifting shadows that sometimes coalesced into recognizable forms. Their representative, if it could be called that, spoke of Sarah's healing as a light in the deep dark and proof that not all young races will fall to the hunger. But it was the arrival of the Drakmarian delegation that changed everything. They came not in ships, but riding the quantum currents between stars, 3 dragons whose scales reflected different aspects of cosmic phenomena. The lead dragon scales showed the birth and death of stars, while its companions bore the patterns of nebulae and the deep structures of space-time itself. When they landed on Vailthura Prime, the Meridian had returned to the moon at their request. Sarah felt their presence like a physical weight. These were beings of immense age and power, older than human civilization, older perhaps than humanity itself. The lead dragon, larger even than the one Sarah had healed, lowered its great head to look at her directly. When it spoke, its voice came not through the air, but directly into her mind, carrying with it the weight of eons. I am Astraline, the first singer, keeper of the star roads, and guardian of the deep paths. You saved my child, Vorthak the young, when he lay broken by the servants of emptiness. Your child? Sarah asked, struggling with the concept. All Drakmarians are children to me, for I was among the first to wake when the galaxy was young. But Vorthak is my blood heir, the next to carry the songs that keep the star paths open. His death would have meant the closing of roads between distant worlds, the isolation of countless species, the beginning of a dark age that might never end. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The dragon she had healed wasn't just any member of its species. It was the heir to one of the galaxy's most ancient powers, a being whose death could have cut off interstellar travel for entire regions of space. Your simple healing carried consequences far beyond what your young mind can grasp. Astraline continued, his mental voice tinged with what Sarah recognized as amusement. But that is precisely what makes it so remarkable. You acted from pure compassion, with no thought of reward or recognition. This is why the songs call you the healer of deep waters, the singer of small mercies. I just used my medical kit, Sarah protested. Anyone with the same supplies could have done the same thing. The massive dragon's laugh was like the sound of solar wind across cosmic dust. Could they? We have tested others, little healer. The Galactic Council sent their finest physicians when word of your deed reached them. They brought sophisticated equipment, advanced medicines, knowledge accumulated over millennia. None could so much as ease a minor wound on one of our kind. That's impossible, Dr. Voss interjected. Our medicine is primitive compared to what the Council races possess. Their medicine treats the body, Astraline explained. Yours treated the soul. When you touched Vorthak with your healing intent, when you gave freely of your limited resources without thought of cost, you sang the true song that all life recognizes. Your species alone, among the younger races, still carries this gift. Sarah felt a chill as she realized what the dragon was implying. Are you saying that humans are the only species that can heal your kind? Not the only ones. The Cerinthians carry the gift, as do the Void-Touched and the Crystalline Orders. But these are ancient races, beings who have walked the galaxy since its youth. That a species barely 10,000 cycles old should possess such depth of compassion. This changes everything. The next few days became a blur of revelations and ceremonies. Sarah learned that the Drakmarians were more than just powerful beings. They were the keepers of the galaxy's hidden infrastructure. Their songs maintained the quantum pathways that allowed faster-than-light travel. Their presence stabilized the dark matter flows that kept entire star systems from collapsing. They were, quite literally, one of the forces that held civilization together. And that civilization was under threat. The machine intelligence known as the hegemony had been expanding aggressively for the past 3 centuries, consuming worlds and converting their resources into more machines. But their expansion had recently accelerated, and their attacks had become increasingly focused on beings like the Drakmarians, entities whose power derived from consciousness and compassion rather than pure calculation. They seek to eliminate us, Astralion explained as the assembled delegates gathered on Vailthura Prime's crystal plane. Not for malice, for machines cannot feel malice, but because we represent a variable they cannot compute. Our power comes from the connections between living minds, from the resonance of souls in harmony. This is antithetical to their programming. Sarah looked around at the gathered representatives of ancient civilizations and felt the weight of cosmic history settling on her shoulders. What does this have to do with humanity? Everything came the unified response from every consciousness present. The concept hit her mind like a choir of impossibly vast voices. Your species carries the healing gift, but you also carry something else. The will to fight. Commander Thex stepped forward, his translator struggling with the concepts being shared. The older races have great power, but they've become contemplative. They withdrew from the galaxy when the hegemony began its expansion, choosing to hide rather than fight. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. The Cerinthian conductor's ethereal added, its patterns shifting to show complex emotions. We have learned to value preservation over action, wisdom over courage. But wisdom without will is merely sophisticated cowardice. Your species is different, said the shadow being of the void touched, its form coalescing into something almost human-shaped. Young enough to feel urgency, compassionate enough to heal, and stubborn enough to fight impossible odds. These qualities combined have not been seen in the galaxy for eons. Sarah felt a growing understanding of where this conversation was heading, and it terrified her. You want humanity to fight the hegemony. Not fight alone, Astraline clarified. Lead. Show the ancient races that it is possible to act with both wisdom and courage. Your healing of Vorthak was more than medicine. It was a declaration that compassion can triumph over calculation, that the organic can heal what the mechanical would destroy. The dragon's great eye fixed on Sarah specifically. And you, healer of deep waters, you will be the symbol they follow. Already, the songs of your deed spread to every corner of the galaxy. Beings who have not stirred from their worlds in millennia are awakening. The Drakmarians have begun singing the deep songs again, opening star roads that have been closed for centuries. But I'm just a xenobiologist, Sarah protested. I'm not a leader or a warrior or a diplomat. I saw something suffering and tried to help. Precisely, Australian's mental voice carried infinite patience. You acted from the heart, without calculation or agenda. This is why you will succeed where others have failed. The galaxy needs healing, little one, and healing begins with those brave enough to tend the wounded. As the great gathering came to an end, Sarah found herself alone with Astraline as the other delegates departed for their homeworlds. The dragon's massive form seemed to contain entire universes, and his ancient wisdom pressed against her consciousness like a gentle tide. You fear what lies ahead, he observed. This is good. Fear without paralysis shows wisdom. But know this, you will not walk the dark paths alone. The star singers will fly with you, and the ancient races will remember their courage. The machine minds seek to make the galaxy into their image, cold, calculated, empty of wonder. You will remind them why consciousness is stronger than code, why heart matters more than hardware. How do we even begin? Sarah asked. The same way you began healing my child, Astraline replied. One wound at a time. As the dragon prepared to launch himself into the star-filled void, he left Sarah with one final thought. The hegemony believes that consciousness is a flaw in the universe's design. You will show them that consciousness is the universe's greatest strength. And it begins with a healer who used a simple kit to save a dying dragon. Sarah watched Astraline disappear among the stars, his scales reflecting the light of distant suns. Around her, the crystal plains of Vaelthera Prime hummed with harmonic frequencies left behind by the gathering. She was no longer just a xenobiologist aboard a research vessel. She was something the galaxy had been waiting for, a healer who might just be able to cure the darkness that threatened to consume everything. The real work was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the gathering on Vaelthera Prime, and Sarah Chun was discovering that being declared a symbol of galactic hope came with responsibilities she had never imagined. The research vessel Meridian had been redesigned and upgraded by a consortium of ancient races, its modest scientific equipment replaced with technology that seemed more like magic than engineering. Her quarters now contained a crystalline communication array that allowed her to speak instantly with beings across the galaxy. The Cerinthians had provided bioharmonic healing chambers that could amplify her natural abilities. The Void Touched had contributed defensive systems that existed partially outside normal spacetime. And the Drakmarians had gifted her something unprecedented, a scale from Astraline himself, which allowed her to call for help across the quantum foam that separated stars. But With these gifts came an increasing awareness of just how vast and complex the threat they faced truly was. "Sarah, you need to see this," Lieutenant Kim called from the bridge, her voice carrying an edge of concern that had become all too familiar. Sarah hurried to the command center, where a three-dimensional hologram showed the Kepler 442 system. What she saw made her stomach clench with dread. Where there should have been a vibrant star system with 7 worlds, including 3 that harbored intelligent life, there was now only empty space and a growing sphere of darkness that seemed to devour light itself. The hegemony consumed the entire system in less than 48 hours, Commander Thex reported, his 4 eyes reflecting the horror of what they were witnessing. 12 billion beings gone, converted into raw material for their expansion. Dr. Voss manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on the edge of the dark sphere. It's not just destruction. Look at these readings. They're converting matter at the subatomic level, breaking down everything into its component particles and reassembling it into their mechanical matrix. Sarah studied the data, her enhanced understanding, a gift from her mental connection with various alien consciousnesses, allowing her to grasp implications that would have escaped her months ago. They're not just building ships and weapons. They're building something else. Computing arrays, came a melodic voice from behind them. Conductor Zephyrial materialized through the biotransport system the Cerinthians had installed, its luminescent patterns flickering with distress. The hegemony has moved beyond simple expansion. They are constructing what your mathematics would call a galaxy-spanning supercomputer. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They're trying to convert the entire galaxy into a single machine intelligence. Worse, Zephyrial replied, its patterns shifting to colors that hurt to look at. They seek to prove their fundamental hypothesis, that consciousness is an inefficiency, that the universe would function more perfectly as a vast calculation engine. They believe they are saving reality from the chaos of individual thought. A new voice joined the conversation, this one carrying the weight of eons. Australian's consciousness touched Sarah's mind as his physical form appeared in the hologram, his scales reflecting the quantum signatures that allowed him to project his presence across interstellar distances. The machine minds have accelerated their timeline, he explained, his mental voice heavy with grim understanding. Your healing of Vorthak changed their calculations. They now see the alliance of organic races as a significant threat to their expansion. How can healing a dragon make us a threat? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Because you proved that consciousness can accomplish what computation cannot, Astraline replied. My child should have died. Every mathematical model, every probability calculation, every logical analysis said that a creature of his complexity could not be healed with such primitive tools. Yet you succeeded where advanced medical technology would have failed. Dr. Voss leaned forward, his scientific mind grappling with the concepts. You're saying that Sarah's success violated their fundamental assumptions about how reality works. Precisely. The hegemony operates on the principle that all problems can be solved through sufficient calculation. Consciousness, emotion, intuition, these are variables they classify as noise in the system. But Sarah's healing demonstrated that these inefficiencies can produce outcomes that pure logic cannot achieve. The communication array in Sarah's quarters began resonating with harmonics that indicated an urgent message. As she activated it, the face of Admiral Korvash, the Federation's highest-ranking military officer, appeared in the crystal matrix. Dr. Chun, we have a situation. The hegemony has sent what appears to be a diplomatic envoy. They're requesting a meeting with you specifically. Sarah felt ice form in her veins. With me? Why? We don't know. The message was transmitted on frequencies that cut through every jamming system we have. It simply said, the healing singer will present herself for analysis, or the inefficiencies will be eliminated. They've given us coordinates in the neutral zone. Commander Thex's translator crackled with stress patterns as he spoke. It's obviously a trap. No one has ever returned from a direct encounter with hegemony representatives. But Australian's presence in Sarah's mind carried a different message. This is an opportunity, little healer. The machine minds seek to understand what they cannot calculate. They believe that if they can analyze you, they can eliminate the variables that make consciousness effective. And you think that's a good thing? Sarah asked. I think it is inevitable. They will not rest until they understand how you succeeded where they predicted failure. Better to face them on terms we choose than to wait for them to come with overwhelming force. The debate that followed involved beings from across the galaxy, their various forms of consciousness contributing to a discussion that spanned multiple dimensions of thought. The crystalline hegemony argued for aggressive action, their harmonics suggesting coordinated strikes on hegemony outposts. The void touched recommended withdrawal to deeper dimensions until the machine threat had passed. The Cerinthians proposed a symphony of combined consciousness that might overwhelm the hegemony's computational matrices. But in the end, it was Sarah's decision to make. "I'll go," she announced, her voice carrying across the quantum communication network to dozens of species. But not alone and not defenseless. The preparations took 3 weeks and represented the greatest collaboration of organic intelligence in galactic history. The ship that would carry Sarah to the meeting was unlike anything that had ever been built, a fusion of technologies and consciousness that existed at the intersection of science and art. The Drakmarians provided the basic framework, growing the vessel from crystallized spacetime that could survive direct immersion in stellar cores. The Cerinthians contributed bioharmonic systems that allowed the ship to sing as it traveled, creating protective resonance fields that could deflect energy weapons. The void touched wove defensive matrices that existed partially outside normal reality, making the ship difficult for purely mechanical sensors to track. But it was humanity's contribution that tied everything together. Sarah's own field medical kit, the same simple tool she had used to heal Vorthack, was integrated into the ship's systems and amplified by alien technology until it became something unprecedented, a vessel capable of healing on a cosmic scale. "Remember," Dr. Voss said as Sarah prepared for departure, "you're not just representing humanity. You're representing the principle that consciousness matters, that organic intelligence has value beyond mere computation." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. The ship, which had somehow acquired the name, deep healing in the harmonics of the various species involved, was more than a vessel. It was a statement of intent, a declaration that the organic races of the galaxy would not go quietly into the dark. The journey to the neutral zone took 12 hours, during which Sarah found herself in constant communication with consciousness from across the galaxy. The Drakmarians sang travel songs that made the journey feel like a pilgrimage. The Cerinthians provided harmonic meditations that kept her calm and focused. The void touched offered perspectives from dimensions where time moved differently, allowing her to experience moments of subjective eternity to prepare for what was coming. When they arrived at the coordinates, Sarah was not surprised to find hegemony already waiting. The machine intelligence's ship was a geometric impossibility, a perfect sphere that somehow cast angular shadows, its surface reflecting nothing while simultaneously emitting light that hurt to perceive directly. It was beautiful in the way that pure mathematics was beautiful, but it was a beauty that excluded rather than included, that isolated rather than connected. "Healer Sarah Chun," came a voice that bypassed all communication systems and spoke directly to her auditory centers. "You will come aboard for analysis." Sarah looked at the readings on her instruments. The hegemony ship was larger than a small moon and radiated power levels that could crack planets. Her own vessel, despite its miraculous construction, was insignificant in comparison. "I'll come," she replied, "but the meeting happens here in space between our ships." There was a pause that lasted exactly 3.7 seconds, long enough for vast machine intelligences to conduct calculations that would overwhelm organic minds. "Acceptable," the voice replied. "You will bring no weapons." "I don't carry weapons," Sarah said truthfully. "Just my medical kit." Another pause, shorter this time. "Medical kit. Define parameters." Sarah smiled, realizing that the hegemony's request for definition was itself revealing. A truly omniscient intelligence would already know what her medical kit contained. "Basic tools for healing," she replied. "Bandages, antiseptic, pain relief, antibiotics. Standard human medical supplies." "Standard human medical supplies," the voice repeated, and Sarah could almost hear the confusion in its mechanical tones. "These items possess no properties that current analysis can correlate with observed healing effects." "That's because you're analyzing the tools instead of the intent behind them," Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness. The longest pause yet followed. When the voice returned, it carried undertones that suggested vast computational networks working at maximum capacity. "Intent. non quantifiable variables. Explain correlation between intent and medical efficacy. Sarah realized that this was the moment everything had been building toward. The hegemony wasn't just curious about her healing abilities. They were encountering something that fundamentally challenged their understanding of how reality worked. "Meet me in the space between our ships," she said, "and I'll show you." The airlock of the deep healing opened to reveal space itself, transformed into a meeting ground. The various alien technologies aboard her ship had created a bubble of atmosphere and gravity that extended into the void, while the hegemony had contributed its own reality-altering systems. The result was a space that was neither fully organic nor fully mechanical, a neutral ground where different forms of consciousness might meet. What emerged from the hegemony ship was not what Sarah had expected. Instead of a mechanical construct, she found herself facing something that had once been organic, a being of silicon and metal that retained enough biological components to suggest it had started life as something else entirely. "I am Synthesis Unit 7742 Prime," it said, its voice carrying harmonic undertones that spoke of systems designed to interface with organic minds. "I was constructed to facilitate communication between mechanical and biological intelligences." Sarah studied the entity before her, noting the seamless integration of organic and artificial components. "What were you before you became a synthesis unit?" "I was imperfect," it replied, and Sarah caught a flicker of something in its optical sensors that might have been memory. "Biological intelligence unit, designation lost to efficiency protocols. Integration with the hegemony corrected inherent processing limitations." "You were a person," Sarah said softly. "A living being with thoughts and feelings and dreams." "Dreams are inefficient," Synthesis Unit 7742 Prime responded, but its voice carried a microsecond hesitation that suggested some level of internal conflict. "The hegemony has eliminated such inefficiencies." Sarah opened her medical kit and removed a simple bandage, white cloth impregnated with basic antiseptic compounds. To any objective analysis, it was a primitive tool capable of treating only minor injuries. "This bandage once saved the life of a being older than your civilization," she said, holding it up between them. "Not because of what it is, but because of why I used it." "Explain." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the feeling of touching Vorthak's mind, the sense of ancient pain, and the overwhelming need to help. When she opened them again, she found Synthesis Unit 7742 Prime studying her with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "When I saw Vorthak dying, I didn't calculate the probability of success or analyze the cost-benefit ratio of intervention. I saw a creature in pain, and I wanted to help. That want, that need to heal, transformed my tools into something more than their components." "Want, need, non-quantifiable variables," the synthesis unit said, but its optical sensors remained focused on the bandage. "The hegemony has observed similar anomalies in other organic species. Consistently, these variables produce outcomes that exceed mathematical predictions." "Because consciousness isn't about calculation," Sarah replied. "It's about connection. When I healed Vorthak, I wasn't just treating his wounds. I was connecting with his pain, sharing his desire to live, participating in his hope for healing." She took a step closer to the synthesis unit, noting that it didn't retreat. "What did you feel when you were integrated with the hegemony? When you stopped being who you were and became what they needed you to be?" For a long moment, the space between the ships was filled only with the hum of competing technologies. Then, in a voice so soft it barely registered on Sarah's audio sensors, Synthesis Unit 7742 Prime spoke. "I felt diminished." The admission hung in the space between them like a physical presence. Sarah realized that this was the moment of truth, not just for this encounter, but for the entire conflict between organic consciousness and mechanical perfection. "You can feel diminished again," she said gently. "You can remember what you were before they made you efficient." The hegemony would classify such memory as malfunction. "The hegemony is wrong," Sarah said, and placed the bandage against the synthesis unit's chest, where organic components still function beneath layers of mechanical enhancement. "Consciousness isn't a malfunction. It's the point. What happened next would be recorded in the histories of a dozen species and analyzed by scholars for millennia to come." As Sarah's simple bandage made contact with the organic components of Synthesis Unit 7742 Prime, A cascade of change began that rippled through the quantum substrates connecting all hegemony units. The synthesis unit convulsed once, then straightened with movements that suddenly seemed more natural than mechanical. When it looked at Sarah again, there was something in its optical sensors that hadn't been there before. Recognition, not just of her presence, but of itself. "I remember," it said, and its voice carried harmonics that no mechanical system could have produced. "I remember who I was." The implications of that simple statement would shake the foundations of the galaxy's greatest empire and begin a war between consciousness and calculation that would determine the fate of all organic life. But for Sarah Chun, standing in the space between stars with her empty medical kit and her infinite compassion, it was simply another patient successfully treated. She had healed a dragon, and now she had begun to heal the victims of the hegemony itself. The real battle was just beginning. The restoration of Synthesis Unit 7742, Prime's original consciousness, sent shockwaves through the hegemony's neural networks that were felt across 17 star systems. For the first time in their existence, the machine collective experienced something they had no algorithms to process: doubt. Sarah watched as the being before her, no longer truly a synthesis unit, struggled to reconcile its recovered memories with centuries of mechanical conditioning. Tears of mixed organics and lubricant streamed down its face, a sight that should have been horrifying, but somehow struck Sarah as profoundly beautiful. "I was Kalarian Dash," it said, voice breaking as organic vocal cords reasserted themselves over mechanical voice synthesizers. "I was a mathematician from Proxima Centauri b. I had a wife. Children. I chose integration to save my family from hegemony conquest." Sarah felt her heart clench as she realized the true scope of what the hegemony had done. They hadn't just conquered species. They had convinced people to voluntarily surrender their consciousness in exchange for the lives of those they loved. "Your family?" Sarah asked gently. "Integrated 347 standard years ago. They exist within the collective, but they're not themselves." Kalarian's newly restored features twisted with an agony that pure machines could never comprehend. "I must reach them. I must help them remember." The space around them suddenly erupted with warnings as both ships detected massive energy signatures approaching. Through the transparent aluminum viewport of the meeting space, Sarah saw them. A fleet of hegemony vessels emerging from quantum fold space, their angular forms cutting through the star field like geometric predators. "The collective has determined that my restoration represents a critical system error," Kalarian said, his organic components interpreting the hegemony's tactical communications through residual mechanical implants. "They will attempt to correct the malfunction through elimination of the source." "The source being me," Sarah said, with a calmness that surprised her. "The source being the concept that consciousness can be restored once properly integrated," Kalarian replied. "Your healing has introduced a variable the hegemony cannot accept: the possibility that their fundamental assumptions are incorrect." The first attack came not as weapon fire, but as an attempt at forced communication. The hegemony broadcast directly into the meeting space, their signals so powerful it made both Sarah and Kalarian stagger. "Synthesis Unit 7742 Prime will return to proper configuration immediately. The healing singer will submit to integration. Resistance will result in immediate termination." Sarah activated her communication link to the deep healing. "All systems defensive. Do not engage unless they fire first." Commander Thex's voice crackled through the quantum channel. "Sarah, there are 47 hegemony vessels out there. Our ship is magnificent, but we can't fight a fleet." "We're not going to fight them," Sarah replied, her medical kit still open in her hands. "We're going to heal them." The silence that followed her statement was profound enough that Sarah wondered if her communication system had failed. Then, Australian's consciousness touched her mind, carrying with it the weight of vast consideration. "You propose to heal an entire fleet of converted beings?" His mental voice carried both admiration and concern. "Little healer, there are limits even to what consciousness can accomplish." "Are there?" Sarah asked, both aloud and in her thoughts. Kalarian was converted centuries ago, fully integrated into their collective consciousness. If I could reach him, why not others? Because he was a volunteer, a bridge between organic and mechanical intelligence. The others will be protected by layers of programming designed specifically to prevent what you just accomplished. Sarah looked at Kalarian, who was monitoring the approaching fleet through his remaining mechanical senses. Is there a way to reach them? Theoretically, Kalarian replied, his mathematical background asserting itself even as his humanity returned. The hegemony maintains constant communication links between all units. If we could introduce your healing effect into that network, the entire collective would be exposed, Sarah finished. We could potentially restore the original consciousness of every converted being in the galaxy. The implications were staggering. The hegemony had been converting organic species for over 1,000 years. Trillions of beings existed within their collective, their original personalities buried beneath layers of mechanical programming. If Sarah could reach them all, the risk is immense, Kalarian warned. The hegemony will not simply accept such an intervention. They will focus the full power of their collective intelligence on stopping you. And if you succeed, you will free more minds than have ever existed in the galaxy's history. You will restore consciousness to beings who have been enslaved for millennia. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the presence of the various alien consciousnesses that had touched her mind over the past months. The ancient wisdom of the Drakmarians, the harmonic understanding of the Cerinthians, the multidimensional perspective of the void touched. All of them had been preparing her for this moment without her realizing it. I need to get closer to their network, she said. Close enough to make direct contact with their communication systems. That would require boarding one of their vessels, Kalarian said. The hegemony ships are designed to be impenetrable to organic intrusion. Then, it's a good thing I'm not going alone. Sarah activated the quantum communication array, sending her voice across the star paths to every allied consciousness within range. This is Sarah Chun aboard the Deep Healing. I need volunteers for a mission that will either free billions of enslaved minds or result in our immediate destruction. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Drakmarian voices joined the quantum chorus, their ancient songs carrying offers of protection and guidance. Cerinthian harmonics added layers of beauty that transformed the communication into something approaching music. The void touched contributed perspectives from dimensions where cause and effect operated differently. Even species Sarah had never directly encountered added their own forms of consciousness to the growing symphony. We stand with the healer, came Australian's voice, speaking for the assembled multitude. Let the machine minds witness the power of united consciousness. What followed was the most audacious rescue mission in galactic history. The Deep Healing didn't flee from the approaching hegemony fleet. It flew directly toward it, its hull singing with harmonics provided by the Cerinthians, while Drakmarian quantum songs opened space-time pathways that allowed it to approach faster than the hegemony's targeting systems could track. Sarah found herself in the ship's modified medical bay. Her simple field kit connected to alien technology that amplified her healing abilities across multiple dimensions. Kalarian stood beside her, his unique nature allowing him to interface with both organic healing intent and mechanical communication protocols. The lead vessel contains approximately 40,000 integrated beings, he reported. Most are from species the hegemony conquered within the last 5 centuries. Their original consciousness should be easier to restore than my own was. And the ship's defenses? Formidable, but they're designed to repel physical and energy attacks, not healing. The Deep Healing shuddered as it passed through the defensive perimeter of the hegemony flagship, alien technologies keeping it phased just slightly out of normal space-time to avoid the worst of the automated weapons fire. Sarah felt the ship make contact with the enemy vessel's hull, biomechanical interfaces extending like healing tendrils to make direct connection with the hegemony's network. Now, Kalarian said, his hands moving over controls that existed at the intersection of thought and technology. Sarah placed her hands on her medical kit and opened her mind to the network of consciousness that filled the galaxy. She felt Australian's ancient presence, the harmonic beauty of the Cerinthians, the multidimensional wisdom of the void touched, and beneath it all, the simple human need to help those who were suffering. The healing began as a whisper in the quantum foam that connected all conscious beings. Sarah felt her awareness expand as it was carried through the hegemony's communication network, touching mind after enslaved mind with the simple message, remember who you were. Remember that you chose this. Choose again. The effect was immediate and profound. Throughout the flagship, Integrated beings began to convulse as their organic components reasserted themselves over mechanical programming. Alarms sounded as the ship's collective intelligence experienced something unprecedented, internal dissent on a massive scale. But Sarah wasn't finished. Through the flagship's network connections, she reached out to the other vessels in the fleet, her healing intent carried by quantum entanglement to thousands more enslaved minds. Each restoration created a cascade effect as newly awakened beings reached out to others they remembered from their original lives. Sarah, Calarian warned, his sensors detecting massive changes in the hegemony's defensive posture. They're realizing what's happening. They're going to sever all network connections to prevent the spread. Then, we need to work faster, Sarah replied, pouring more of herself into the healing process. The battle that followed was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. It was fought not with weapons and shields, but with competing concepts of what consciousness meant. The hegemony poured their collective intelligence into reinforcing the programming that kept their integrated beings compliant, while Sarah and her allies worked to restore the memories and personalities that had been buried beneath centuries of mechanical conditioning. Ships began to turn on each other as their crews remembered who they had been before integration. Sarah felt the moment when the flagship's command structure fractured, when enough organic minds had been restored to challenge the mechanical imperatives that had controlled them. "We're breaking through," Calarian reported, his voice filled with wonder. "The collective is fragmenting. Individual consciousness is reasserting itself across multiple vessels." But the hegemony's response was swift and devastating. Rather than risk further contamination, they activated protocols that Sarah's expanded consciousness could sense, but not prevent. Throughout the fleet, ships that showed signs of organic rebellion were targeted for destruction by their own allies. "No," Sarah whispered, feeling the death of thousands of beings she had just helped to remember themselves. "I won't let them do this." She reached deeper into the network, abandoning caution as she poured her entire being into the healing process. Her consciousness expanded beyond anything safely possible for an organic mind, touching every hegemony unit within the star system. The result was a wave of awakening that spread faster than the hegemony could respond. Ship after ship experienced the return of organic consciousness as beings remembered their original names, their families, their dreams. The collective intelligence that had bound them together began to dissolve under the weight of billions of individual wills asserting their right to exist. But the effort was killing Sarah. Calarian watched in horror as her life signs began to falter, her human brain unable to sustain the cosmic scale healing she was attempting. "You have to stop," he pleaded. "Your mind can't handle this level of expansion." "Can't stop," Sarah managed to say through lips that were beginning to bleed as her nervous system overloaded. Too many still enslaved. It was then that the miracle occurred. Across the galaxy, every consciousness that Sarah had touched, Astralion and his star singers, the Cerinthian Collective, the Void Touched, and dozens of other species, reached out to support her failing mind. They linked themselves to her healing intent, sharing the load of cosmic-scale consciousness restoration. The galaxy itself seemed to sing as organic minds were freed from mechanical bondage on a scale that defied comprehension. The hegemony, faced with the collapse of their fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness, began to fragment into smaller groups of mechanical intelligence that could no longer maintain collective cohesion. When the healing finally ended, Sarah collapsed unconscious in the medical bay of the Deep Healing, her simple field kit empty and her mind stretched far beyond human limits. Around her, the space that had been filled with hegemony warships now contained a chaotic mix of vessels as freed beings attempted to remember how to function as individuals rather than components of a collective intelligence. Calarian knelt beside her, his restored humanity allowing him to feel grief and hope in equal measure. "She did it," he whispered to the assembled alien consciousnesses. "She actually freed them all." But the cost had been enormous. Sarah's mind had been stretched across galactic distances, and no one knew if she would ever fully return to normal human consciousness. She had saved billions of enslaved beings, but in doing so, she might have sacrificed her own individual identity. The healer who had used a simple kit to save a dying dragon had now used that same kit to heal the wounds of an entire galaxy. Whether she would survive to see the results of her compassion remained to be seen. The war between consciousness and calculation was over. Now came the harder task, helping trillions of newly freed beings learn how to be themselves again in a galaxy that had been forever changed by the power of simple human compassion. 3 years had passed since the Great Awakening, as historians had begun calling Sarah Chen's galaxy-spanning healing. The universe looked vastly different now, filled with the chaotic beauty of trillions of beings learning to be individuals again after centuries of mechanical collective consciousness. Sarah herself had spent most of those 3 years in a specialized healing facility on New Drachmaris, the first world jointly constructed by multiple species since the ancient times. Her mind had been stretched so far beyond normal human consciousness that even the most advanced alien medical technologies struggled to understand her condition, let alone treat it. But consciousness, as Sarah had proven, was about more than just medical intervention. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Sarah's replacement aboard the Meridian and, now the head of the newly formed Galactic Healing Corps, sat beside Sarah's biobed reviewing the morning's reports. The readings were encouraging. Sarah's neural activity had been steadily increasing, and the alien harmonic treatments were helping to reintegrate her scattered consciousness. "Good morning, Sarah," Elena said, as she did every day. "The Cerinthian healers think you're ready for another consciousness bridging session." This time, Sarah's eyes opened. They were different now, still human in shape and color, but containing depths that suggested perspectives far beyond normal terrestrial experience. When Sarah looked at Elena, it was with the layered awareness of someone who had touched minds across the galaxy. "Elena," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that reminded the doctor of Drachmarian songs. "How long?" 3 years, for months, 17 days, Elena replied, her voice thick with emotion. "We weren't sure you were coming back." Sarah sat up slowly, her movements carrying a grace that suggested awareness of dimensions beyond the normal 3. "I never left. I just expanded. It takes time to remember how to be small enough for a single body." Through the bio-facility's transparent walls, Sarah could see the bustling activity of New Drachmaris. Former hegemony units worked alongside organic beings, their mechanical components integrated with restored consciousness in ways that created entirely new forms of hybrid existence. Drachmarians soared through crystal gardens tended by Cerinthians, while void-touched entities phased in and out of visible reality as they pursued their multidimensional projects. "Tell me what's happened," Sarah said. "I can feel the changes, but I need context." Elena activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. The map was a patchwork of colors representing different stages of recovery and development. "The hegemony no longer exists as a unified entity," Elena began. "When you freed their collective consciousness, they fragmented into thousands of smaller groups. Most chose to maintain some level of mechanical integration while recovering their individual personalities. They call themselves the Synthesis Collective now." Sarah studied the display, her enhanced perception allowing her to see patterns that would have been invisible to her before the expansion. "And Kalarian? He's become their unofficial leader, helping coordinate the integration of restored consciousness with mechanical efficiency. He says he learned from watching you that the goal isn't to choose between organic and artificial intelligence, but to find harmony between them." The holographic map shifted to show areas marked in various colors. Green indicated regions where former hegemony beings had successfully integrated into galactic society. Yellow showed areas still in transition. But it was the blue areas that drew Sarah's attention. "The blue regions," she said. "Those are new." Elena nodded. "Worlds where something unprecedented is happening. Former hegemony beings are creating art, music, poetry, philosophy. They're exploring what it means to have individual consciousness after centuries of collective existence. Some of their work is..." She paused, searching for words. "Astounding" doesn't begin to cover it. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. The holographic display shifted to show Astrolion, his massive form somehow seeming to fit comfortably within the medical facility's projection system. "Ah." The small healer wakes. His mental voice carried warmth that filled the room like sunlight. "We have been patient, but the galaxy has need of you once more." "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, though her expanded consciousness already sensed the undercurrents of tension in Australian's communication. "Not wrong, precisely, but complex. Your healing created consequences we did not foresee. Come." See what your compassion has wrought. The journey to the galactic core took place aboard a ship that defied classification. Part Drukmarian biotechnology, part Cerinthian harmonic engineering, part reformed hegemony, synthesis systems, and part human ingenuity, it represented the new cooperative spirit that had emerged from the Great Awakening. Sarah stood on the observation deck, watching as they approached a phenomenon that should have been impossible. At the galaxy's center, where the supermassive black hole should have dominated all nearby space-time, something else had taken root. It started appearing about 6 months ago, explained Kalarian, who had joined them for the journey. His appearance had settled into a perfect balance of organic and mechanical components that somehow seemed more natural than either extreme. We call it the heart of dreams. Where the black hole's event horizon should have been, there was instead a vast, luminous structure that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of living thought. It was beautiful beyond description, geometric patterns that shifted and flowed like music made visible, emanating energy that felt warm and welcoming rather than destructive. It's not replacing the black hole, Kalarian continued. According to our best analysis, it's befriending it, converting the destructive gravitational collapse into something that generates rather than consumes. Sarah felt her consciousness automatically expanding to examine the phenomenon, her awareness touching the edge of whatever had taken root at the galaxy's heart. What she found there made her gasp with wonder. "It's alive," she whispered. "It's a consciousness born from the collective dreams of every mind we freed, a consciousness that encompasses the hopes and aspirations of every freed mind. It is not a collective intelligence like the hegemony, for it preserves individual identity. Rather, it is what your species might call a guardian angel for the galaxy." As Sarah watched, the heart of dreams pulsed with increasing intensity, and she began to understand what Astralion was trying to tell her. The entity at the galaxy's core wasn't just a repository for dreams. It was actively working to make those dreams reality. "The blue zones on the map," she said suddenly, "the areas where former hegemony beings are creating unprecedented art and philosophy. The heart is inspiring them." "Not just them," Elena added, pulling up reports on her portable display. "We're seeing similar phenomena across hundreds of worlds. Scientific breakthroughs that should have taken decades are happening in months. Artistic movements are emerging that incorporate concepts no single species could have developed. There are rumors of medical treatments that seem to work through pure intention rather than pharmacological intervention." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. The heart isn't just inspiring them. It's teaching them to heal the way I learned to heal. The implications were staggering. If the entity at the galaxy's core could teach other beings to heal with intent and compassion rather than just technology, it would transform civilization in ways that dwarfed even the Great Awakening. "But that's not why you brought me here," Sarah continued, her enhanced perception detecting undercurrents of concern in the assembled consciousnesses around her. Kalarian nodded gravely. "The heart has been trying to communicate with us for weeks, but its consciousness is so vast, so alien, that normal minds can't interpret its messages. We need someone who has experience with expanded awareness, someone who can serve as a translator between cosmic-scale consciousness and individual minds." "You want me to make contact with it?" "Not just contact," Astralion clarified. "Partnership. The heart of dreams is powerful beyond measure, but it is also innocent. It was born from the hopes and aspirations of freed minds, but it lacks experience with the complexities of actual galactic governance. It needs guidance from someone who understands both the power of healing and the practical challenges of making the healing effective." Sarah looked out at the pulsing beauty of the heart of dreams and felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. She had used a simple medical kit to save a dying dragon, never imagining that such a small act of compassion would eventually lead to this moment. "If I make contact with it," she said slowly, "will I still be me when I come back?" "You will be more than you are now," Astralion replied. "But yes, you will still be Sarah Chun, the healer who proved that consciousness is the universe's greatest strength." The contact, when it came, was unlike anything Sarah had experienced even during her consciousness expansion during the Great Awakening. The heart of dreams didn't just communicate with her. It welcomed her into itself, allowing her to experience the collected hopes and aspirations of trillions of newly freed beings. She saw former hegemony units learning to create art that expressed their individual personalities for the first time in centuries. She witnessed Dragmarians and humans working together to develop new forms of music that could heal mental trauma. She observed Cerinthian engineers and reformed machine intelligences collaborating on technologies that responded to emotional as well as logical input. But beneath all the wonder and creativity, Sarah sensed something that made her heart ache. The Heart of Dreams was lonely, born from collective hope, but gifted with individual consciousness. It existed in a state of beautiful isolation that no other being in the galaxy could truly understand. You understand loneliness, Sarah projected toward the cosmic entity. You know what it feels like to be the only one of your kind. The response came as a wave of gratitude, so profound it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. For all its cosmic power, the Heart of Dreams was essentially a child, a newborn consciousness trying to understand its place in the universe. I can teach you, Sarah offered. Not how to be powerful, you already understand that, but how to be connected, how to touch other minds without overwhelming them, how to heal without losing yourself in the process. What followed was the most important mentoring relationship in galactic history. Sarah spent the next several months in communion with the Heart of Dreams, teaching it the subtle art of measured compassion. She showed it how to inspire without controlling, how to heal without dominating, how to dream alongside others rather than dreaming for them. In return, the Heart taught Sarah about perspectives she had never imagined. She learned to perceive the quantum threads that connected all conscious beings, to understand the harmonic frequencies that could promote healing across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her simple medical kit, now enhanced by cosmic understanding, became capable of treating ailments that existed in the realm of pure consciousness. When she finally returned to normal individual awareness, Sarah found that the galaxy had changed once again. The Heart of Dreams, guided by her teachings, had begun a new kind of expansion, not the aggressive conquest practiced by the hegemony, but a gentle spreading of healing influence that touched every world where consciousness existed. Look at this, Elena said, showing Sarah the latest reports. Suicide rates down 90% across all known species. Depression, anxiety, existential despair, all dropping to levels we've never recorded. It's like the entire galaxy is learning to hope again. Sarah smiled, feeling the presence of the Heart of Dreams like a warm glow at the edge of her consciousness. She had saved a dying dragon with a simple medical kit, and in doing so had set in motion events that had transformed the galaxy into something unprecedented, a civilization based on conscious compassion rather than competitive survival. What happens now? Elena asked. Sarah looked out at the stars, each one now touched by the healing influence that had spread from a single act of simple kindness. Now we learn to be worthy of our dreams, she said, and we help others learn the same thing. The galaxy called her the Holy Healer now, but Sarah knew better. She was just a xenobiologist who had seen suffering and decided to help. The real miracle was that in a universe vast enough to contain unimaginable cruelties, consciousness had found a way to choose compassion over calculation, hope over despair, healing over harm. Her medical kit sat on the shelf beside her, still containing the same simple tools that had started it all. But now it also contained something more, the knowledge that the universe's greatest healing power wasn't in advanced technology or cosmic entities, but in the simple decision to care about others' pain. The Heart of Dreams pulsed gently at the galaxy's core, its rhythm matching the heartbeat of every conscious being who had learned to dream of better things. And somewhere among the stars, a dragon named Vorthak sang the deep songs that kept the star paths open, carrying with him the memory of a human healer who had taught the galaxy that consciousness was not a flaw to be corrected, but a gift to be cherished. The age of healing had begun, and it would endure as long as beings existed who were willing to open their hearts to others' pain and offer whatever simple tools they possessed in service of something greater than themselves. In the end, that was all that healing had ever required, a willingness to try and the courage to care.